Memorial Airport Commission. We're meeting in hybrid format, but all commissioners are present except for Mr. Buscarin, but we don't have any online. So we will not need to do roll call votes. At the same time, the meeting is being both video and audio recorded. So please use care with the screen share online. And please be sure to direct any comments to the chair. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns with the agenda as published? Hearing none, we'll consider that adopted by unanimous consent. We have the minutes from the August 12th meeting. Were there any comments or questions? We'll consider those adopted by unanimous consent. We have the August 6th and August 20th warrants to ratify. Are there any questions or points to discuss on the warrants?
Mr. Gasbaro,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. We have Mr. Buscarin.
Oh, perfect.
With us. Yep.
Welcome, Mr. Buscarin. By roll call, could you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So with Commissioner Buscarin online, we will indeed be taking our votes by roll call.
Sorry about that.
No problem at all. Thanks for joining us. Are there any questions on the warrants of August 6th or August 20th? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to ratify those two warrants.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Scarron?
Aye.
Beloved?
Aye.
Mr. Marks? Aye. And chair votes aye. Any public comment for items not otherwise on the agenda?
No.
Public in the room. And we'll move on to pending leases and contracts as set forth on Exhibit 1, and I will turn it over to Manager Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, commissioners, again for us meeting again another month. It's a pleasure to always be with you. Going down and looking at the exhibit, the first one on here is a catering license agreement with One Sparks Avenue, also known as Millie's Catering, for the $1,500 annual business fee application. They would like to provide more catering provide catering at the airport. Moving down, the next one is a contract with a GMSTEKX1, which is our FBO software and card processor that we have been using for the last 6 years, and it's for their new 3-year contract. All right, next one moving down is a contract with Waterworks of Nantucket for the installation of new irrigation system for the employee housing over there on 10 Nobadeer Farm Road. The pricing includes installation of the 11 zones of lawn irrigation with work to begin, hopefully at the end of this month. Moving forward, another contract with 5 Star Airport Alliance. 5 Star is our baggage belt system, and it is for an emergency repair contract, which of course includes travel expenses and for just repair services in emergent times. The next 3, I won't go through them each one because they're all kind of linked together. They're a landlord waiver agreement for loan refinancing with Rockland Trust Company and Airport Gas. Yeah, so I think that's all that is on the list if I'm correct.
As well as Harborview.
I'm sorry, Harborview, yes.
Both,
Yes.
both,
I apologize,
both
yes.
entities.
I apologize. Harborview and Airport Gas. There's 4 ones, sorry. Yep.
Were there any questions on any of the pending leases and contracts? Mr. Levitt?
Just one comment on the GMS tech. You described it as being for software and credit card processing. I had some emails with your office, and we aren't using the credit card processing portion of it, as I understand it. So it's just software.
It's a software only. Yeah. And I emailed them this afternoon to ask what will be the credit card processing if we would like to add that to the contract in the future. And I will.
This contract doesn't include it.
Doesn't include.
Okay. And then my second question is on the Waterworks contract. It would seem to me that when the dorms were designed and it included landscaping, did the architect and the OPM not put irrigation into that contract?
I don't think the original contract has this items included.
It seems to me that that's a pretty obvious miss by both of them.
Absolutely.
Because I assume they had a landscaping plan in there.
Yeah,
And did they have another means that they expected the landscaping to survive without irrigation?
it's a good question.
I have no comment on
Do
that.
we, I think that raises a good point. Do we need, I know that we've already been back, or our engineers have been back through the plan because of the note about watering.
Right.
Is there any notes or, references on the contract or the plans about providing irrigation? Are we sure before we take this on as a miss and take it on that it wasn't a line item in any portion of that contract?
It's a good question, something that I would have to go back and look into. I don't believe I've seen it on there, but like I said, I don't want to say something and be wrong. So I think that would be more of a research question of the contract.
If I may,
Yeah.
I think that timing is of concern here. If they're gonna re-spray the grass, so that there'll be time for germination prior to the end of the fall season. And if we held this for a month, we probably would miss our opportunity, I'm gonna guess. I think that I don't know how the rest of the commission feels. I would be inclined to approve the contract, though I do wonder if we should have a stipulation of some sort in there that if we find it was in the contract, we would seek reimbursement from the contractor on it. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, 100%.
Does that address your concerns a little bit?
It does. I mean, it's short dollars, but it's more, we've already seen some things that they missed, and this is just adding to the list.
And not only short dollar, I mean, I wouldn't it's real money, and it's, I think that it's if it's on there and it's in, I think somebody, ideally it should be the OPM. I think they should give us an answer.
Correct.
I don't think it should be on you to comb those plans, but sometimes something like that is on a sheet that is just filled with notes. And maybe it generally was missed, and on that, we might have to, do this, but it still is, something I think of concern regardless. So,
And they are doing the reseeding?
they are.
Mr. Chair, to support your comments there, since the grass didn't take, installing irrigation is going to adulterate the earth. So it's actually probably not a bad time to do it, since earth will be disturbed,
Well, they
including.
pull most of that pipe. It's not a big,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah, they'll
not
pull it
a
all.
giant
Okay.
disturbance.
Okay. Fair enough.
But either way, are there any other questions on any of the contracts? Is there a motion to approve the contracts and agreements as set forth on Exhibit 1? Licenses.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Viscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Answer.
Aye.
Mr. Levitt.
Aye.
Mr. Marks. Aye. The chair votes aye. Thank you. That'll take us on to a discussion on jet fuel, which we had agreed as a commission last month that we would have on our agenda, and staff and our consultants have done some research. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Smith.
You bet. And at this time, I'd like to turn the time over to our chief consultant, Mr. Rich Lasden with McFarland Johnson to.
So Lasden, the floor is yours. Thanks for joining us.
Can I share my screen?
Yes.
Oh, it's more, make sure I get the right screen. Okay, let me know when you can see my screen.
No.
Not yet, yeah.
No, oh, share. If you push the share button, it works better. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, at the last commission meeting, we discussed about looking into expanding the fuel farm and sort of some high level thoughts on what that means. So here on the screen, we've sort of showed a expansion of the fuel farm, and where this is it's in the gravel parking lot where the rental car companies store their overflow car rentals. So we'd have to have a sort of discussion internal to the commission on, is this leased land or is this a yearly license for them to store their cars there? But it does a couple things, right? It's right next to the existing fuel farm. It's right next to the existing fire suppression system. It's next to the distribution system and the off and on loading racks. So it sort of makes sense to put it right here. There is some things to consider. Um, there is obviously some excavation here. There is relocation of the perimeter fence. There is the potentially some community questioning on the need for 100,000 gallons of more fuel if that's the direction the commission goes with. But we did 4 years ago, I guess it was, there was a team of consultants. MJ wasn't involved at the time. There was a team of consultants that upgraded the existing fuel farm, and it included two firms, one called Code Red, which did code consulting and designed the fire suppression system. And the other one was a firm called Wilcox and Barton that did all the controls and monitoring and other pieces of work. So I have reached out to both of those firms to sort of get their input on what would be necessary. So again, the expansion, we looked at 4 25,000 gallon tanks above ground. So there would be a land use permit with the town. You're a member of the town, but there would be some kind of a permit. Fuel systems are permitted by the state fire marshal when they're over 10,000 gallons. So this would have to go to the state fire marshal for permit. And then there's a series of sort of geometry standards on where the tanks can be, how close they can be, how close can they be relative to the other tank farm that's there today. Because both farms are over 100,000 gallons, we would have to leave this concrete wall between them and have two separate containment wells. In talking with the fire suppression firm when they did this previous building, in what looks like very good hindsight, they sized that building for this expansion. So we would not need to do any upgrades to the fire suppression system that was just most recently installed. So that is a bit of good news. The monitoring and the metering systems would need to be reprogrammed and upgraded to meet this system. We would have to relocate the perimeter fence. So as an airport, that's a couple of things, right? That's an ALP update, which we are putting it on the ALP. It's a security plan update and a couple of other administrative drawings. We're still investigating with Natural Heritage, although I don't expect anything to be an issue, understanding where it's going to be located. And then sort of maybe the last item is probably where we want to start talking. I did have some conversations with another fuel vendor. I didn't call World Fuels. I believe you use World Fuels. I am working with Titan Fuels at a different airport on putting in an additional tank at another airport. And so he gave me some very rough order of magnitude numbers of prices. So I used that along with some other excavation costs and concrete costs and some design costs. And I came up with a program value of around $22 million for this additional 100,000 gallons of storage. And I guess, Mr. Chair, I'll open it up for any and all questions or discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Laston. And I'll just start and then I'll open up just one, where you finished. This project will be self-funded. Now we'll have to look at, borrow, whether it's some combination of long-term borrowing or pay down with some retained earnings or however we finance that. And then I guess one of the things I would be wondering is what kind of savings or cost, might we be looking at if we were to build the moat and provide the infrastructure for the 100, but only put in 2 tanks perhaps. Is something I think we would be, how much would that reduce the cost? And would the two tanks at 50,000 provide the buffer we need. I think that it's important to keep in mind that we don't have a storage capacity problem in season. We have a delivery problem of the product. So we have the room, and the point of putting these storage tanks in is to bank that fuel in the off season when we theoretically and hopefully could get the deliveries. So I think that this is very helpful for us to know what we'd be looking at for the fuel farm expansion. And my sense is we should continue to think that we may need to do it, but we should look at all of the menu items before we fully decide to commit to this project at this price, right? So what other options might there be? That is I think financially it concerns me in terms of we have not taken on a project self-funded of that magnitude. That I could think of that for this purpose alone and everything else that we have that we're balancing. I think we have to really be sure that what our other options might be. And so we'll open it up to further the discussion. And really, how do we get more reservations? I mean, that's one of the pieces I think that, if we could not spend this money because we could solve the problem in another way, it's something I think we have to consider. So not against it, but I'm not all in either personally. Anybody else? Yeah, Mr. Mark.
I'd like to understand how we got to $22 million. When I know I can buy a fuel tank tomorrow for $100,000 brand new out of the wrapper. How do you get to $22 million? And concrete doesn't cost that much money, so basically it's somewhere in the programming and some piping, and the fire suppression system's already large enough, so it's a little bit more piping and some valves. I just fail to understand $22 million. I'm sorry.
Okay, so
Help.
I did speak with Titan Fuels, and I asked him again, and they were putting in a tank on the mainland, and I asked him for a programmatic cost, and I said if I had to build, and at the time I was thinking a 20,000 gallon tank. So he said, what is the cost of a 20,000 gallon tank all in, including pipes and controls and everything associated with it? And he told me that he was in the process of doing one for another airport, and it was about $1.5 million for a 20,000 gallon tank. So, this is a bigger tank. Nantucket has traditionally been 50 to 75% higher than the mainland on a bunch of costs. It is public works, but I don't have an answer for you. If you can get a 25,000 gallon tank for $150,000, is that what you're?
I actually found 11 24,000 gallon tanks, and they were $65,000 a piece. They were used, but
Yeah.
and I didn't get a brand new tank price, but they weren't used like 50 years old, and they look brand new. So that's why I'm confused. And
Then
nothing against you. I did a
Yeah.
little research. And the number just makes no sense at all to me. If it
Okay.
was missing zero, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's 0.2 million.
I'm sorry.
If it was like 2.2 million, it makes more sense for
Yeah.
what we're trying to do here. Unless there's that's why I'm asking you. I'm trying to understand what I'm missing with that. That's all.
Yeah, and that's fine. I'd be more than happy to go back again, but I did call a distributor and ask him for a price. So I'd be more than happy to go back and talk to World Fuels or somebody else to see if this price was completely off. But that's the price I was given by Titan Fuel.
So, but you said it was $1 million for 20,000 gallons, right?
It was $1.5 million for a 20,000 gallon tank on the mainland. And on Nantucket, your prices have traditionally been 50, 75% higher than the mainland pricing.
So we're
Just
still
because of
at 10 million then. How did we get to 22? That's where I'm even at your numbers.
because
still-
that would have been $3 million a tank. If there was, according to his price, it was $1.5 million for one 20,000 gallon tank installed complete.
Yeah, the three, and I appreciate, and I know, Mr. Lasden, that, and thank you, Mr. Marks, that, we've asked you to do this quickly, and so
Yeah, yeah.
but I guess at 3 million and we were doing 4 tanks, that's 12 million. And I guess so the other 10 in your estimation is based on the moat and all the other systems, so you're saying it's 3 million just for the tank?
So,
and
so I had
all?
about, no, I had about a $500,000 in concrete and excavation. And then because we don't know what else we have, I put in, I think, a 25% contingency. And I threw in engineering costs. And I'd be more than happy to go back and look at this some more, clearly, if
I'm
Mr. Marks
wondering
has
if
better,
now that,
significantly different prices.
yeah, I'm wondering if now that you've had a chance to develop this sketch plan at least.
Yep.
And given that World Fuel is our provider.
Yep.
And I understand that without going out to bid and contractor is getting actual proposals, but. Part of this is the part of our discussion further on this meeting is also going to be, and Mr. Viscarin, I do see that your hand is up. And is whether to add this to our capital project requests and what would be that line, that number in there. And if we are, you know, too high, it's gonna cause, everyone's gonna sort of have these same questions, and it's hard, you know, so. And it's a timing issue, if, you know, the Capcom process is about to start. And I think we have to be careful, how we, what we decide to put in there for that number. So. I do think that, you know, if there was a way, and I know we're sort of just, this is a little bit of shooting from the hip. But, you know, if this number was closer to 12 instead of 22, my hesitation would be, you know, quite a bit different. 20, I can't think of another project that for me, and same thing, I put in a rectangle within a gravel lot adjacent to other areas with, I think of logistics in my own mind of ease of access, delivery, like this seems fairly straightforward, right? It's not a groundwater. You don't have some of the other complications that sometimes otherwise drive costs up, other than Nantucket, but you've accounted for that. So,
Yep.
I think a good look at what we decide, I think that we might be better off with a TBD number and having a line item so that it shows we're thinking about it as we get to that, but before we start to float a number that is very preliminary. Or if not TBD, we might want to throw a range that, you know, maybe does a 10 or a 12 to 22 or something. So I think those are all things that as a commission we should discuss. And I think this discussion also needs to segment into some the other aspects of jet providing the jet fuel service and deliveries, as well as we try to. This is our chance as a commission to all discuss these matters. So, Mr. Buscarin?
I have no interest whatsoever in loading up our debt for $22 million if we're not going to get any ALP money. You know, we've really got to watch our retained earnings. We're spending it all on the fence and the housing, and we have to balance loading up debt for a fuel farm issue or more housing. You know, we certainly can't afford both, and I don't like to build up long-term debt. That's what I
Appreciate that. But I would balance it, if I may, and I think it's part of the discussion, in that it's a revenue, it becomes a revenue source. And so you also have to, I think, look at it versus those other items aren't. And if we're having to put in uplift restrictions to not sell a product that we could otherwise have, I think it's not as direct. And I'm with you, and that's where I was coming from on the 22. I'm very sensitive to what we take on for that long-term debt. But I think that we have to look at it as both a revenue and expense side because of the nature of providing this. So love it.
Rich, in your master plan, table 7.4, you've got $1 million to install another avgas tank and $1 million for a SAF tank. How big are those tanks?
Honestly, I'm not sure what that was. We were in the process of updating that because that's a preliminary number that hadn't been validated yet. So,
Because if that's a $10,000 or $20,000 tank, I'd prefer those to the $22 million ones.
yeah. Yes,
Um,
understood.
So, I mean, one of the numbers is wrong, and
Correct.
I'd like to understand. Okay, an additional question that's sort of related.
Yep.
My understanding is that right now, in addition to the 120,000 gallons of fuel that we have in the fuel farm, we keep about another 15,000 gallons in tankers that we lease. Is there a limit as to how many tankers we can have parked out there? That anybody's aware of? No. Okay, so if there's no limit, a 7,000 gallon tanker, I'm sorry, a 7,500 gallon tanker is $3,500 a month, which we would need for maybe 5 months a year. And I'd rather put a fence around this parking lot here and put 10 or 20 of those tankers in it. And then when our peak season is over, those tankers can go home. And for a couple $100,000 a year, we'll now have another 100,000 gallons of fuel or whatever the demand is for it. And if the demand scales up, we can bring in more tankers. But I kind of like somebody to. I did a quick little spreadsheet in about 3 minutes. I'd like somebody to perhaps push some numbers a little further. But there seems to be such a huge difference in cost. The point that was brought up earlier about not wanting to take on a large amount of debt. This would involve taking on no debt, since it's small amount of operating numbers that could be throttled as the demand picks up. And unless we're missing something on a regulatory basis as to how many trucks we can have out there, and maybe they can't all be parked next to each other in a row and have to be scattered about, but it seems like we got a lot of places to put trucks.
Any thoughts on that, Mr. Laston, or I'll give you the floor first?
Yeah, I would have to check with Code Red and maybe Preston has some thoughts on that, but I would have to check with our code firm to see if there's a concern with that.
I mean, as far as what we have now, the trucks has to be parked 10 feet away from each other. So if we're leasing a few more trucks, then yes, we'd have to find parking for them. As far as how many can we have, as we want, as how many, I just wrote down a note here. I need to reach out to our field to see how many 7K trucks or 7,500 gallon trucks that they have, that they could let us lease for the season.
And what about an option?
E-trailers in one semi,
Well,
because you gotta move them over into the tank farm to offload them.
or
If that was the plan, right? And you need a guy that's gonna be able to move them.
it would be a fuel truck, not a tanker. It would be a truck that's probably got hoses on it, pumping systems and all of that. We don't want to go down the road of a temporary tanker, then it turns into storage, and I think we're gonna have to spill containment and all of that.
I misunderstood.
The trucks themselves that are refuelers can just sit
Right.
on the asphalt.
And that leads to the question about the current car rental storage area. Are we aware of if that is officially encumbered by some sort of a lease agreement or a license, or is it simply an area that the airport has established for a certain operational use? And we have the ability to modify that at will. So that, I can't think of a lease plan that I've seen that, and you could, any of you tell me, I don't know if that is how that's utilized in terms of whether it is shared space amongst all of the companies, I believe it is, but you could tell me that, and if it's not, for any one operator, then I don't see how it is, how, you know, why we couldn't modify that and maybe perhaps split it up and move a portion of that operation to another part of the airport, and then we could, to Mr. Levitt's point, which again, this is part of what we're looking to explore. We might want to make some modifications of fencing, still back to the ALP, to provide that nice parking area for the refuelers, 10 feet apart, stripe it. This is where they go. Everything's nice and orderly. It's right in the close proximity to the refilling of the refuelers. You know, that would make sense. And if we're going to look at and perhaps continue this discussion as well, a multi-pronged strategy, this is one of those pieces that then puts off a, you know, $12 to $22 million capital project. I love it.
If the car rental facility has to be moved somewhere else, am I correct that we have CFCs in the bank that can only be spent on rental car improvements? And could that, and I don't know if that money is earmarked for anything, but could that money be used to construct a car rental parking facility? In which case, we're not taking any money out of any budgets that could be used for anything else.
That is my understanding.
Yeah,
That's
that
correct.
It's the last one, yeah, from past experience.
yes.
So
I
there's.
don't know how much is in there, but that is what CFCs can be used for. That's correct.
But you have, any further, more ideas on the fuel?
Not on the fuel storage, but as you mentioned, that we have some other challenges in getting more fuel there.
Before we go to that,
here, or
the one thing you mentioned to me that I would like to put out and have a discussion was about the avgas. You know, as part of this, if we had two, which I've been thinking about quite a bit, if we've got two avgas tanks, we already converted one. And based on our current usage and turnover there, does it make sense to convert a second 20,000 gallon existing avgas tank to Jet A?
And then not having to, and then.
No, you still have one. You still have avgas. We have two. And please staff, this is just what was brought, you know, is that you have 40,000 right now. And was 20, given the, you know, demand of avgas, does 20,000, you know, does that make sense? And I can't remember how much it cost us to convert that other tank. But my recollection was that it was like in the hundreds of thousands and not really, it was still a fairly significant expense, I think, for inspections but it was cleaning. There was some work there, but I don't believe it was a giant lift.
I
You
know,
guys have any thoughts on that? I'm not asking that we're gonna definitely do it, but I think this is our meeting at the
Yeah.
commission to collectively discuss whether those things might be doable. And so
when I crank some numbers on this, we've, as I understand it, 40,000 gallons of avgas storage and 120,000 of jet in tanks. Our jet fuel, we turn 18.4 times a year, and we have 5% reserve. Our avgas, we only turn 2.9 times per year, and we have a 34% reserve. So there's a huge mismatch in the amount of storage we have versus the amount of fuel that's sold on each one. And it would seem to me that if storing fuel in the fuelers, a case could easily be made that all of the avgas is stored in an additional fueler truck. when I looked, I didn't see a month where we sold more than 10,000 gallons of avgas. And,
Yeah.
that way we could convert both underground tanks to jet.
Yeah, I don't think it's practical to fill the aircraft with the fuel, though, the smaller aircraft.
In August,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
But isn't that how you're fueling it now?
No, it's a small little truck they use. They don't use that big truck. It's a.
yeah, avgas trucks are 1,000 gallons each.
Yeah.
Yeah, in August alone, we pumped 21,000 gallons of avgas.
Yeah, we did new records
It's,
here.
we're,
More to that later, but yeah.
yeah, I think we'd have to look into the numbers on that, because this is the most avgas I think I've ever seen. We were pumping 700 gallons a day.
Yeah.
Would one 20,000 gallon tank be okay? Maybe, if we can keep up with the reservations.
You're gonna run into the same problem.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We gotta be careful.
I think the turn ratio is actually more appropriate in the avgas, and it's vastly out of scope in the Jet A. That's the problem.
We were so focused on jet fuel through July and August that on Monday, we got 2 loads of avgas this week. On Monday, we had about 5 days worth of avgas left before we ran out. It's been a while.
But, would that, if the concern is maintaining a reserve, could you store 7,500 gallons of avgas in one refueler and then move it to the 1,000?
Probably not. I don't think they make the avgas trucks that big.
Okay.
Yeah, and the larger trucks like that are set up for jet fuel, different filtration systems on them.
Bigger hoses, bigger pumps. everything.
I'll ask World Fuel to see what the biggest avgas truck that they have, but it's probably 1,000 for a gallon.
Maybe we can get one of those $1 million tanks that Rich has to put in, yes.
I deserve that. Okay, I'll take that.
Well, again, I think.
I will look into this further, but that's the price I got from another firm.
My sense was that it would be that we wouldn't want to completely do away with that, we would certainly, I think, would want to keep at least one. 20,000. The question is, do you really want to keep, and then use perhaps a refueler strategy there as well? Not all refuelers, given the capacity limitations. But the question is, or we want to be careful that we don't create the same, to Mr. Morris's point, that we don't create the same problem with avgas that we have with Jet A, because a reservation's a reservation. And we are able to essentially bank the avgas the way that we want to be able to bank the jet fuel.
One other thing
Yeah.
with the underground storage tanks is they're 26 years old. So there's only 4 years left of warranty on them. And if there's any issues whatsoever, DEP is gonna require us to pull them out of the ground, basically. After the 30 years, we could get them recertified for another 10. So I don't know if it's worth the money to convert if they're that old.
That's all very helpful information, I think, as we weigh sort of all of these things. And we're operating without hiccup, if you would, with avgas, providing avgas right now. I mean, something just got close, but
Yeah, we've been.
really because you were juggling your reservations for the jet fuel side of things, but okay, so that was a good, I think, thing to consider. Leonard, did you want to move on to the transportation side of things?
Thank you. One of the big barriers we seem to have is transportation, bringing the fuel here. And, I was just sketching out a couple of options to kick around with everybody. The first is certainly with the steamship. You guys have been, negotiating with them for a number of years, and it seems that we get about 75% of the requests that we put in, they knock us down. I don't know if increasing the number of requests, if we're still going to be at a 75% fulfillment level, gets us a few more, or if they won't let us play that game. It seems to me that's one thing we're doing. Seems like we can't have too many reservations if we don't need them, and so there are lots of other takers.
And Mr. Marks, you might have more info on this, but last year requested. I believe for the month of August, 14 a week. No, I'm sorry, 16 a week, and we got 14. So we ended up getting about 2 less a week than what we were requested. So we're gonna probably do the same.
I think you have to, you actually need more, right? So you have
Right.
to ask for more.
Ask for more
And then
and
if they
see
cut
what
you
we
back,
get.
then you maybe are missing 1 or 2, right? I know I gave you guys like
Right,
3 or 4 reservations.
correct. Thank you.
But we worked out because it just shifted them around. It works more with your demand there. So. I think it's not easy, and like we had talked about before, I think I mentioned was like working with Noonan more heavily too, because.
Mhm.
And I know you do. And like, we don't even have to get the reservations ourselves, and they seem to have a little bit more horsepower there with the steamship authority. And maybe we just, because they don't charge anything for getting the reservations, they just do that as part of their business and just say. Hey, we're gonna have you haul our fuel, right? We need this many gallons, you give them how many you're gonna pull every month, and then they get the reservations, that's what I do. So they know, like, end of April, they know what I'm gonna pull all year,
Mhm.
more or less, right, with the exception of weather, what they built that in, because they know. That what the usage could be based on the winter, right? So if we give them the same kind of a thing and see if they can fulfill that agreement for us. And we can take that off our plate, we don't have to.
Right.
Fight with the steamship anymore, not that it's a fight, but it's a little bit because we can't get what we need. It's a thought.
So is the question, would Noonan offer us a contract service to manage the reservations for a fee? Is that,
It's not a fee. It's
Well-
baked into the trucking already. My trucking, there's no fee for that.
I see,
I pay so much a mile essentially. I pay so much a gallon per mile is what it is, right? For the transport. Getting the reservation, they provide the reservations as part of that. But that number is-
so we're gonna get into the little weeds here, but I think that's good in terms of now how does. And that world fuel factor in with Noonan, so we simply purchase the fuel from
World
Noonan
Fuel,
and then.
no.
From World Fuel, excuse me, and then we pay Noonan the transportation costs,
That's right. That's how I do it now. Like
but is
I-
that how the airport does it?
I'm not sure on the accounting side of things,
Mhm.
how it's all
I
rolled
guess the
together.
management, yeah, just let it.
In the last warrant package, there were a lot of fuel bills. Since I'm not as familiar with them as the rest of you, I asked to see one, and the bill that I saw separately broke out the cost of fuel and the cost of transportation, which was about $14,000 per truckload. So it looked like we were paying World Fuel, who was paying Noonan or somebody else. And I didn't see any other disbursements separately for transportation.
That makes sense, because my recollection has not been to see a lot, it's all been to World Fuel. Or maybe a cent it used to be, as I recall, and when I would review warrants, so they're then paying. So the question is, how do we get the transportation provider
So,
to take on the reservation system?
yeah, so we just have to. What you have to do, what I suggest we do, okay, because this is that we go to World Fuel, we just want to price the fuel, period, right? And we're gonna provide our own transportation. And then we go to, and the parallel, right, we just talk to Noonan, or maybe ahead of time. And say, hey, this is the number of loads, like, just look at our usage this year, and we say, this is what we need next year, plus 10% or whatever. And they'll give us a contract, like I just said, like my gallons work that way. Cause I go negotiate with all of my suppliers. And that's what we would do as a commission, we'd negotiate with our fuel for our fuel price, just a fuel price. There's a lot of these guys, you can also like, they'll provide the trucking as well, right? Some of these fuel propane suppliers, right? But I don't do that because I live on an island and Noonan knows Nantucket, and that's why we use Noonan, because they know our situation much better.
So I think what I'm hearing and see, is that we need a review. Perhaps by legal as well as on a finance side of our current World Fuel contract. To understand what our obligations are right now under an existing contract, when that contract is gonna come due, and whether there's modification provisions or how we might approach, if this is based on this discussion, sort of the consensus and from staff that that would work. Is there a way to separately contract the transportation such that they're responsible for, like, right now, what I keep hearing is, and I've heard for some years, we, Zoom is airport staff, are seeking these reservations, and not getting, all of them. And if it was completely under the umbrella of the energy transportation supplier, now, would that work out better for us? The other side of that coin for discussion is whether we keep it the way that it is, but the request in years past to the steamship we'd have to dig into this a little bit, but coming from a town entity providing a service and the quasi governmental nature of the steamship, do we perhaps come in as a commission, make a request or a plea or discussion with the steamship board of governors as to, helping us allocate the reservations we need? I think those are the two things to think about. Yeah, I'm still
Sort of the other side of that is separating the fuel from the transportation implies that, one, we might be able to buy it for less. But if everybody is constrained by the capacity of the ferries, I'm not sure it is necessarily going to be a lower price. But World Fuel has an incentive for there to be more ferry slots because they sell us more fuel and they make money when they sell us more fuel. So they should want there to be more reservations as well. I can't imagine they're holding us back, that it's just Noonan. And if we were to separate it, I think we would have to think through whether we have the staff and the expertise to do the logistics work of marrying up the transportation with the fuel when it's ready, loading it, all the various pieces. And if there's one entity such as World Fuel that has end-to-end responsibility, I would think that they would be handling that coordination perhaps a little better than if it was separated out.
Which is how it's done now, correct? Right? You've got dispatch out of World Fuel that contacts Noonan.
Robin,
Right.
Right, it all runs through World Fuel,
So that's what you have.
reservations.
We have that.
Right, so we don't have
They
any
coordinate
other
with
over
Noonan.
The only
They
thing
did the
that,
steamship reservation? World?
Yeah,
They do it all.
yeah, the only thing that seems to be a little bit out, sort of to me as open is, we've referred to it as we have requested these more reservations, but in fact, maybe it isn't coming
Right.
from
It's
the
World-
airport, it's World Fuel. And this is just, it might be semantics, but now it's very important to understand who is making that request. And, and understanding that the steamship is, operating at capacity pretty much, and, but how are they deciding who is, what is the mechanism by which, and I had asked this a couple of years ago, and it definitely seemed to not be crystal clear as to how those hazmat slots are divided or decided on early. So, and I'm not trying to upset the complete apple cart here amongst all, that we all also to be considered are the other energy suppliers and the other gas stations. And it's all, just like we're saying we need jet fuel. Well, people have to heat their homes and be able to drive their automobiles. So, there might be weighing, well, you have that versus you're telling us that you have uplift for a jet, and, we're giving you what we can. How do we, as an airport commission, as an operation, somehow get to that 16 that were requested. I mean, when I looked at those numbers and it was say that we asked for 16 and got 14 across 5 summer weeks, well, that's your 100,000 gallons right there. You know, that would have, or 50. Yeah, I guess that would have been, no, that would have been 10 loads. It'd be 100,000 gallons. I mean, and that,
So it's, no, it's just the tanker's what, 75?
No, we get 10.
Yeah.
10 each load?
yeah, so it's 10 a load. So, right, and that in of itself would go a long way to avoiding the situation that we find ourselves in, as well as balancing off this consideration of this enormous capital project.
Mhm.
So how do we get those other 2 reservations? Can we use this summer as an example, in terms of that we had asked, we didn't get, we weren't provided, and then it led to this other situation? What are the mechanics of trying to do that? This is the time to certainly have that discussion. And who do we need to talk to for that, I guess? And how can the commission help? But as a staff, man, you know, but you've asked, you tried, or World Fuel has, both of, you know, and so it wasn't provided. So where can, as a commission, we, you know, and all we could do would be to ask as well. But I think if there was to be, you know, and documented, supporting documentation, right? This wouldn't just be can we please, we would work to compile the information that showed how we dropped down based on that, and where we would have stayed. And then still at the same time, consider the refueler strategy as, again, if we solve this right now, ideally, we're continuing to sell more fuel, right? That we're not just at 2025 stagnant, right? This is all, we have to provide additional, you know, room for growth too. So any suggestions on how we maybe go about that?
Yeah, I think that Preston and Warren should reach out to the steamship authority directly, reach out to the top dog in the steamship and say, this is our situation. This is where the request has been coming. World Fuel, not directly. And this is our situation, and we need you guys to help us support us. It's their job to do this, right? To provide us the transportation to and from the island, so.
So we start off with, you know, our request from the airport manager to the general manager of the steamship,
Yeah, to have a conversation.
you know,
100%.
as, you know, we had you know, and it demonstrates that. I think that's a good start before we get to like a commission to board of governors level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, you know, is that and then you could always get the feedback to bring back to the commission to say,
Yeah.
this is what they told us, and we're good to go, or we're out of luck, or we need more information, or what have you. I think that makes a lot of sense. But
But perhaps to support their requests, we start by telling World Fuel, we want 24 a week next summer. And you put in those requests to work them down. And
well, if I may, what we have to be careful of is that we can accept the loads, right? So we'd have to be careful that we don't end up in a situation where especially early season, that the farm is at capacity. You said you wanted this, we made a spot for you.
That's right.
And here it is, and now you're saying, sorry, I can't actually take it. So there is a line of not just the sky being the limit here. And I think out of respect for the steamship, understanding that they are, and I think everyone else now that needs them, that, you know, we do want to be careful that it's, I'm not a big fan of, I understand negotiations, but sometimes asking for more and settling. I like to say, this is what I really need.
Yeah.
And continue to defend my position personally, as opposed to going in with something I'm willing to give up. Maybe everyone does it a little differently and we could decide, but I do think we have to be careful that we didn't ask for more than we could hold.
I would agree with that. Being someone that buys fuel all the time, all my fuel suppliers, like, if I run short, I call them up and tell them I need more fuel, and 90% of the time I get it because I take everything that I've asked for. So they know that whatever I put out there, I'm taking. And if that's what you want to be, you want to be the guy that takes everything that, you're gonna use everything that you need and not have 10, 15 reservations you don't, that would be a disaster. So if they gave them to us and then we didn't use them, so.
So what would be the number
With bot.
that we could
Yeah.
use? So the number's obviously
Well, you said
Higher-
16, I think.
higher than 16.
Sounds reasonable.
It was higher than 14. 14 didn't do it,
Yeah, 14 didn't do it.
right? And so. And we're looking also, I think, at the early season ones, right? The fourth, that was a summer, but I think from what I looked at and where we had discussed, and I know that when Warren first came on, I would ask a lot, where are we? How close are we to capacity? And that was great in May.
Yes.
And then we started chasing our tail, right? For lack of a
Come the
better,
4th of July.
trying to keep up, right? And
Yeah.
it was a continuous, and then but to that point, there would have always been room to accept a load. Right, so what do we also look at what we had received in June, July, August, perhaps, maybe even May? Maybe, we're gonna be careful, like, when we get to that point that we could get it to near full, but it seems that maybe we add the 2 to each of those months, which I think from what I had seen puts us pretty much asking for what we asked for last year, but didn't get. And going back again to say, this is, we asked, I think that's a strong position to say we asked and we understand you gave us what you could, but it left us in a pinch.
I think also that it's good for Warren to talk to them as well, because, they got the new freight boat now. And I believe they're bringing more trucks with the freight boat, so there have been some, and that wasn't the case this year, they didn't have that. Remember, we had all the problems with it and everything when it first came out. So I think there's probably some room even for them to maybe accommodate us without getting too far in the weeds with it.
Yeah, and one piece of information that I had been told was this summer season, they didn't run on a few holidays, and next season they will. But this summer, we also didn't really have too much for mechanicals, maybe they would, or weather. Now next year, that could be okay, they added the 3 holidays in, but we lost those other days to, and they're out of that unforeseen. So I guess the question is, based on, we don't want to completely shoot from the hip here, so is there forecasting that and fine tuning that we could do to determine the ask number?
Or the pattern, right? Like you need more in the middle of summer.
Yeah, that would be the forecasting, exactly. I think
Right,
that,
like
we know it's already, we benchmarked it. But then what might we want, might it be another load or 2 above because of the increase in sales that you've seen? Right? We were where we were projected for last year. I mean, there clearly was room after Memorial Day for the rest of the season, pretty much from what I saw, there was room in the farm to accept more fuel if we could have gotten it.
And if we're trying to have capacity for next year that we had this year, our fuel sales grew 20% this year. So if that trend line is going to continue, you would have to make an assumption that we need 20% more fuel next year and not just bring in enough fuel to meet what we sold this year.
Right, so where is that? I think that's what we probably need to work on if, as you're gonna go to them. Because again, I think it's one thing to have a discussion, but it's much better if there's action item that comes out of that. That discussion is, I'm here to talk to you about this, and this is what we need, and that's determined. And then it ties us back, though, looping back to the start of this discussion and the big capital project. Before we commit, which again, I don't think I'm really necessarily ready to fully commit. Do we continue? I think we should, in some respect, for a design effort on the additional storage to then understand better pricing on it, right? You know, if we put some investment in, you know, into the, down the road that Mr. Lazen has started, because a lot of it's this, you know, the areas, you know, it's getting into some finer logistics, engage MJ for a bit more work to get to some design level that Mr. Lazen you feel is appropriate, whether it's like a 60% or something, you know, 75% design that you could, you know, and I understand it's hard though going out fully to bid, but you could get a better engineer's estimate once you had been paid to do additional design work and code work without, you know, does that, you know, make sense? And then that ties us back to the capital program discussion, whether we're actually asking for that or is that premature given the timing?
I definitely think there's two facets, right? First thing is to try to resolve getting the boat reservations, 100%. My opinion on that, and I think that also we have too high a turn rate on our storage. It's too high, and that's part of our problem.
And I feel like I like the idea of the refueler option. So there's sort of a third balance approach here that as we try to look at all of this, with the only thing, and I think we should do, I think we're hearing is that we should look at all of that, but the only timing piece of things that also we have to be sensitive to is putting out there whether the airport is pursuing this 100,000 gallon or whatever it is, additional storage project, or is it still an investigation? And if we want to have a placeholder in our capital project, and I'm starting to meld agenda items here, but we'll have to talk about whether or not we're going to do that. Whether we're going to have that, you know, I like it there, but it might not fly. We'll see how far it will fly through a Capcom and FinCom process with it being a TBD number, right? Well, not TBD is not going to get us the funding, but maybe we want to just get it out there that it's a capital project. It came out of the master plan also. That's the other piece of this, you know, it was identified. So it's not like this is, it's just, it seems like the magnitude is significantly greater than maybe what was being considered in the master plan and what our need may be. So.
Well, it seems like until we can fine tune the number a little bit.
We can't put it out there.
Nobody's gonna vote for 22 million at this.
No.
And I don't think anybody here believes that that's a real number. Rich started with, it was 20,000 gallons with 1.5 million. If you put the 100% Nantucket premium on it, that's 3 million. And if we bought 5 of those at 3 million each, we'd have 100,000 gallons, and now we're at 15 million. So already we've knocked down the price by a third. So, you know, I think perhaps we ought to assume that there's a problem with that $22 million number, and we shouldn't do any planning based on it until somebody can come back with a more realistic ballpark.
Agreed. So to move on in advance here, yeah, go ahead.
Before we get off of transportation,
Yeah.
I had 2 other things I wanted to throw out that people at this table may have more information on behind it. The freight ferries that used to bring our hazmat over, the 2 old ones were bought by Robert B. Hour, who's one of our contractors, and they are talking about establishing freight service to New Bedford, primarily to haul things off the island. Has anybody had any conversations with them about their interest in bringing hazmat over so that the Steamship Authority isn't our only vendor and bottleneck?
I hadn't thought of that, but the expense of them is going to be double.
Double beats not having it. But if we don't ask, we're not going to know. And I mean, if they were going to bring a boat over full of petrochemicals. And your business, you needed product, and all of the other energy suppliers here needed product, we could probably fill a boat. And if that boat was coming over with not a lot on it, they, because of their primary goal is to backhaul trash, as they've announced they're trying to do, there may be some negotiating capacity there, but to throw out the option because we think it would be too expensive without getting the price first, it seems to me to be premature.
I think it would be worthwhile to inquire if something they would even be interested in. And also with the steamship, is the licensing that they're pursuing going to allow that, right? And so I think it's worth a call to find out if it was something they would even be interested in. And Warren, is that something that I think we have asked our manager to reach out just in the preliminary as we're exploring all options?
Absolutely.
You know, and then at least know whether it's off the table. Like, no, where they're just not even interested in handling that, or that's something that might be able to be made to work. And at
So-
least we would know it's a maybe.
So just so you know, it's not only because I listen to it all the time, right? It's a long boat ride, but the problem is hours of service, right? That's where you're gonna get beat up, right? So the truck driver's gotta come here and he's gotta go home in the same day. So instead of a 2.5 hour boat ride, he's got a 4.5 hour boat ride. And by the time he gets here and offloads, he's timed out. So now what do you do with it? That's kind of the whole picture with that process with fuel, because he can't just, he has to be on the boat with the truck, can't leave the boat and then just, you know, show up and then a whole bunch of guys go and offload the truck and then take the trucks away. You can't do that with hazmat. You have to be, driver has to be there. And I think that's where we run into a big problem with that as well. So I'm not saying not to look into it, but that's gonna be a big hurdle.
Well, they're certainly gonna save time driving from Boston to New Bedford than Boston to Hyannis coming over the bridge in the summer. It'll take up a little time there.
I'm just saying, that's gonna be what they are worried about, is hours of service. Cause now you took 5 hours on the boat and turned it into 9.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference.
And I think from the Boston factor, I think that they come for that early boat. So their delta of New Bedford to Hyannis, you know, isn't like summer Saturday morning. It's probably, you know, not much more than that 35 minutes or what have you that it might be. So all good points. So the driver timing out is something we have faced in, you know, and the other thing, because I've asked about this in the past to the jet fuel, that again, it was a learning process for me. There's only so many tankers that hold jet fuel that, and they're dedicated tankers is what I've been told in the past. And that also factors into the ability to obtain the product. So, but if we could get, that's where I'm thinking, you know, that's where I feel like it's a combination. Probably need some storage, but maybe not 100,000 gallons. Maybe the refuelers help pick up a bit of that, and we don't need 24 reservations, but we really need those 2 more that hopefully the supplier could keep up with in the transportation infrastructure in terms of the providing the drivers, you know, as much as we want to get more and they want to give it because they want to sell it, there's several hurdles to getting that product into our tank, I think, that are, you know, not just is multifaceted. So I think it's worth a sort of up the flagpole to understand at least, you know, like, oh, that's just, you guys that's too much and here's why, or might be something, you know, that as well, at least we would know.
Yeah, it might work too. Just those are the hurdles that I've experienced.
Anything further on jet fuel for right now? I guess we'll get to the next agenda item and then we will still need to circle back when we get down to the capital projects. We'll pick this back up again. Is everybody good for right now? Mr. Lasden, you're gonna continue to look into that. If you need an additional work order or something else for that, I think, let us know. Mr. Smith, you are going to reach out to the steamship PM
Yep.
and report back. And Preston, you're gonna look into the World Fuel, the refueler options. And we'll put this on our agenda for next month. Again, I know it's gonna be something we put some time into, but we've got to solve this.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Got it.
Moving on to pending matters.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This time I'm going to turn it on over to our environmental coordinator, Ms. Madison Collins, with PFAS update.
Yeah, so we have a few items to discuss on PFAS. The biggest being that the immediate response status report number 18 has been completed as of August 24th, 2025. So this report is due to Mass DEP by October 1st, 2025, as noted in the status report. So we are actually a little bit early in completing that. One of the biggest findings that came out of the IRA was that the sandpit stockpile had a large increase in PFAS-6. So it went from no detection to 942 parts per trillion. To find out more on why it went up so much, Weston has noted that they need to do soil accounting to find out why. And then another item relating to PFAS is Andrew Shapiro, the new environmental coordinator for PFAS through the town, is applying for a technical assistance grant. So the goals of this technical assistance grant is to increase involvement in the MPC and gain a better understanding of how PFAS has vertical contamination. They have sent off this application, but it remains to be seen if they get the reward. Weston has also completed sampling for Statue Park, and PFAS was detected in groundwater, and the concentrations that they found were consistent with the historical results. This sampling also found that was also monitoring groundwater elevation, and so they confirmed through this that groundwater condition were in fact flowing north to south as expected. So which means this is, for reference, they're flowing from Old South Road to Airport Gas in that direction. Weston is still trying to figure out, is still working on the forensic analysis on the PFAS fingerprint and like signatures on this. And so they expect to have that completed by next week. Internally, another thing we've done is that we've begun the bidding process to clean the ARC truck. Right now, we are considering bids from Revive and Clean Harbors. And then lastly, for water bottle deliveries, throughout the month of August, we delivered to 4 residents. One resident that was receiving bottled water was already connected to town water, but they had recently stopped receiving bottled water. We've given them numerous notices about this. This was an elderly resident who was cautious about the transition from bottled water to the water line. So we allowed them the summer to continue getting bottled water, but we are stopping that now that the peak season is over. Yeah, that is everything. Is there any questions?
One
Yeah.
comment with Clean Harbor and Revive.
Yeah.
We awarded to Clean Harbor and
Yep.
then we're in contract negotiations.
Yep.
For the truck.
Excellent.
Phone transition.
Thank you.
Did we get any updates on the samples on the trailer in my yard?
No, they said another week. As soon as we get those back,
Okay.
we'll try to get that out of there for you.
Because now you see it's getting boxed.
I know. I saw there was a few things surrounding it.
Yeah. The only other item that I would just wanted to add to that was in relation to the discussion we had last commission meeting with legal counsel on the phase 4 deadline extension that was provided to Mass DEP 2 weeks ago. They've confirmed receipt of that and are looking that over.
Do we have any questions on the? Okay, moving on.
Moving on with crew quarters. So from last meeting, with what the OPM have presented, there are three, last punch list items that are, you need to be completed. Those are the first one is the reseeding of the lawn around the dormitory that is scheduled for September 30th. The second one is the electric car chargers. They have moved the shipment date up an entire month. It should be here around next week for installation, which is great news. And then the last one, of course, is the arc fault labels. They have been installed by the contractor as outlined in the contract. However, there's some discrepancy between the electrical inspector as to if those are the right arc labels. The OPM and the contractor have been going back and forth with that. That's the last punch list item. So that's all that I have for the crew quarters. I'm hoping to have an answer from that one imminently as to why.
I just wanted to share, if it's okay, I got an explanation about the
Sure.
breakers, I just talked about.
Yeah.
So there was one of the line items for, overcharge and upcharge rather, was the, installation of a disconnect,
Right.
400 amp disconnect. And I happen to be in the bill department, so I asked the wiring inspector, I said, can you explain this to me just so I can understand? And what he said is that the breaker that's in the panel is a 600 amp breaker. And they put that breaker in there because we have expressed that we may want to build out the basement. That's why they did that. But they only ran 400 amp conductors into the panel from the street. Because was never asked if we wanted to upgrade that or whatever, so that's what's run in there is 400 amp conductors. So the breaker itself can be turned down to 400 amps. But the concern by the wiring inspector is because the conductors feeding it are less than what the breakers actually rated at. He was afraid that it could potentially be upgraded without upgrading the conductors, meaning just turn the breaker up and then you could run the building. So that's why he asked for the disconnect to be installed in between the service and the panel. So that was the explanation he gave me.
So now that just raises more questions and concerns for me that we don't have, if I'm understanding what you said, the required power to power the basement because the conductors are only 400 amp.
That is that's how it was explained to me.
Well, that's not, this was our entire project was to provide the infrastructure to finish the basement. And so if we could please look into, it's not just that issue. I understand. And because what would you have to do now? You'd have to run, so based on that, you'd have to run a new service.
Yep.
Right,
That's my understanding.
Yeah, so again, I appreciate that, and we could try to, let's make sure that, if that is in fact, I think we would, do a request for information from our designer to confirm that the service installed and spec'd was suitable for the power that we anticipate would be required in the basement. And have that as a written response if I'm hearing that.
If I don't have that, obviously.
No,
that
information.
information,
Yeah, it's just, this is just, hopefully there's something, yeah, no problem, and there is, and. But we don't know that without asking, because our very next, everything that we did on this project was that, you know, we wouldn't have spent all that money on the retaining wall and putting all the plumbing in under the slab. Everything was done telling our designer to provide this so that we would pick it up when we had the money to do the finishes, basically, to construct the walls. And to not have an appropriate power specs, I think is something that we'll have to understand.
Okay.
Anyone else on that? So. All right, keep us posted,
You
please.
bet, I got that note.
Thanks for checking into that.
Yeah,
So that's, again, a new piece of information that I would have thought maybe our OPM might have told us. But maybe there's another side to
Yeah,
that.
they could, sure.
That's all that I have for the crew quarters.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
At the last meeting when we talked about the delay on the group orders, I believe you said, and it's in the minutes, that the penalty on the delay of 1,000 a day starts on June 30th, and you subsequently did some more research on that. Can you just update everybody on what the delay is and penalties and do?
Yeah, so we have done some research on that. However, legal counsel wants to review that right now, and it's in their ballpark right now. So that's the best update I can give right now, because they want to make sure that we've got the thorough understanding of what was written in that contract. So that's the best answer I can give you right now. So it's just within our legal department. Hopefully I have an answer within the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Terminal optimization.
You bet. The notice of funding opportunity is imminent, as they keep saying. They said July, they said August, and they're saying September. So again, we're just keeping our eyes and ears out for that. We did have a great discussion last week with our consultant, some members of the commission as well, to discuss the terminal optimization and the different parts that were specific to that. Those were the geothermal wells in the system, and meaning better yet, the filtration system with the geothermal, common use in the terminal, hold room space repurposing, and of course the front curb design. And what came about from that is that it is best for us to separate the geothermal filtration system from the terminal optimization project, which, as you see here on the pending matters, we have done that. And then of course, just the question was, how do we proceed if grant funding is not available or given to us? How do we proceed on touching each one of these items? And if that is still on the table, and I think we came to an agreement saying that is, and how would we tackle each one of those one by one? So yeah, more to come with that, but that's what came about with that meeting. So.
And anything on terminal optimization, we'll talk about geothermal next.
Mr.
Yes.
Chair, if I can. So we did discuss that, and we discussed in a big picture sense, sort of the calendar, I'll say, of happenings. So for this federal funding, the government wants a grant application based on bids from the contractor. So by June 30th, we have to have a grant application that would include a bid from a contractor, which means all of our design would have to be completed by, say, April, so we could put this out to bid. So we have to sort of think about the time frame. If we don't get, if the NOFO comes out in, let's say, the end of this month, we probably won't hear from the government until possibly January on if you were awarded a grant or not. And then your design team would have to write a scope, have it reviewed by the federal government, and then do an IFE, and then be able to design this and have it completed by April, so that there's a bidded project for the grant application in June.
Thank you for letting us know. And given the level of work that we've already done.
Yep.
I mean, all of the base plans, all that scanning, I still think that, I guess what you might be asking is, should we be advancing some additional design effort at this point to
Yes.
be more prepared for that without going all the way?
At least for the commission to consider starting the design on the assumption that you're going to win. And then, the commission can always stop the design if it's started, but I'm not sure if there's enough time to actually design this project if we don't get an award from the federal government until January or February.
Okay, so now we, as a commission, need to discuss and decide the design elements that would be in the scope of
Correct.
now that we reduced our scope significantly from where we were on the optimization project, and you likely need some direction for that.
Correct.
Do you want to run through your understanding of where we may want to head with that?
Yes, sure. So the outcome of the report was to do some repurposing of the building, and in a simplified fashion, the general idea is to see if we can't eliminate the use of the tent or greatly reduce the use of the tent. And so one of the discussions at the time was to repurpose the basement by moving the airline back offices down into the lower level, and then shift the screen baggage system for the TSA into that space and expand the hold room into where the TSA is today. So that was the biggest piece of the puzzle. Some of the other items were eliminating the kiosks that the airlines use for processing tickets and bag tags, and going to what's called common use equipment. And common use equipment essentially means that the airlines run on your IT backbone, so they all don't need their own servers, and then they would be able to log in through your network, and so any airline can use the kiosks, and any airline could use a podium at the gate or any spot on the ticket counter. So it's called common use terminal equipment, which is very common in a lot of airports today. So that was the second piece of it. And then the third piece of it was, in simplified words, doing something on the curb front with the circulation road and the sidewalk people processing area on the curb. So those are the three areas that we've talked about.
And so do you need a new task order, and would you then have McCready back involved as a sub to you
Yeah.
for that?
Yes.
And if that is, I guess, why not get us a task order to review
Okay.
for that, though before we set that in motion, let's have a discussion amongst the commission that is the direction that we might want to go with the upgrade elements of the terminal. And I think that's where we've moved from. It's still going to be in the millions of dollars, and that gives us the plans to then decide, if we didn't win the grant, if we were still going to take it on as a capital project and try to improve the terminal regardless, to move from. And I think, to the extent that the three items that you reviewed could be menu choices, if you would, right? Like that they would be, you could not do one of them and do the other two or three. We should set that up that way to the extent possible.
Okay.
Does that make sense to everybody?
Mhm.
All right, so we'll see a task order perhaps for our next meeting,
I will.
which would put things in. If that's approved, then you'd be into motion a couple of months ahead of when we would know and about the grant. Okay, makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
So Karen, yeah, please.
So one question, we probably don't have any say in this, but we discussed when the majors come in here and the schedule at all. Are we able to participate in that?
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, they usually start around mid-May and.
No, I meant the day thing. It seems like they all show up at 4:00.
The gate scheduling is pretty much what you're asking.
Yeah.
How is that
Curious if
determined?
we have any input into that, or they just, because of their whole network,
I
it's
think
how it falls
we're
in.
going to this year
We are.
because of the
Yeah.
dual ops raise
Correct.
for JetBlue and the A220s, and American is looking at possibly upgrading,
Seems like it's just a.
wanting
nightmare
to
there.
do dual ops as well. And I actually just messaged VOC as we were sitting here about some sort of a gate management
Yes.
plan.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
So
yeah.
we do have a little.
hopefully.
We do. Yeah. VOC does offer that service for us to do some gate management. So that's good on that end. But yeah, there's more to come on that building.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Okay, I think does that cover it on terminal optimization, so we move on to high mass lighting update.
You bet. Yeah, with that one, it's just really no major updates from our last meeting. Construction is still slated to begin in early spring. Grant's been signed for that. And yeah, so
I think we could take that probably off the agenda as a separate item unless there's any updates as we go along. Especially it's a spring project, we don't need to put that on there. And the sound barrier.
sound barrier, we had our kickoff meeting on August 14th with Premier Fence. They had their on-site visit, got the initial badging with the contractor, and the intent and the consent was given to pour the bases this fall for the barriers and then have the barriers installed in late spring before summer.
Thank you. Likewise, I think that also would be moved to project updates unless it's built differently. And keep us posted of any developments under your management report, if you would, please.
Absolutely. You bet.
And now the geothermal well discussion.
You bet.
Mr. Lasden, do you want to give us a little bit of background on this?
I will. So, let me find some emails. So the geothermal wells, are out in the parking lot. They were installed in roughly 2008 as part of the geothermal heating and cooling system for the airfield. They are called an open loop system, which means the heat exchange function is in the basement. So they draw water out of a well, the heat exchange is in the basement, and they send the water back out into the ground in a return well or a separate well. And it was sort of discovered, whatever the term is, that as part of our PFAS problem, we're moving groundwater around. So the wells, it appears that the area where the supply wells are has a PFAS contamination level in it. And the areas where the return wells, perhaps maybe in the past did not. And it looks like we are spreading the water around. So we've had many conversations on what to do with that. There's a couple of different options. We looked at eliminating the geothermal system completely and putting in something else, but there's certainly a lot of benefit both to the community and yourselves on using a geothermal system rather than going to some electric or hydrocarbon-based system. We looked at changing the wells from an open loop to what's called a closed loop. A closed loop is where the heat exchange happens in the ground. The difference is on a closed loop system, they are not as efficient as an open loop, and you need many, many more. And I think it was perhaps 100 wells that we needed for a closed loop system to get the same amount of heat exchange that we have now. So the answer came back, can and should we treat the water before we use it in the heat exchange? And so, yeah, the answer is yes, it can be treated. It's no different than a municipal water service would be in treating water. And I think perhaps Comet is struggling with this now and has a similar size treatment system that can be used to treat the water. And we would treat the water, run it through our heat exchange, and then put it back in the ground. And ultimately, one, be treating the water, and two, you'd be gaining some perhaps community benefit, and then also showing the state that you are moving ahead with phase 4 of the program, which is to mitigate your PFAS problem. There was also a discussion of perhaps using this system to treat the water from a plume that's across from runway 15 over by the current T-hangar complex. And since there's a plume over there, can we use this system to draw the water from that plume and sort of help start mitigating that plume over there? And so I guess I'll start with there. If that is the way that the commission would like to go, just, understand that that water source from that plume by the T-hangars is maybe 1,000 feet away. And we'd have to install groundwater wells over there and then install at least supply pipes across the whole grass approach and then across hotel and the apron out to the connection to the heat exchanger in the building. So it's a significant amount of pipe. And then we'd also probably have to upsize the well and the pump motor for the length of that run of pipe. So I guess the first thing is the commission, is there an interest in moving the supply wells to that other area so we can treat that water?
I don't think that we haven't reached that point yet with the phase 4
Correct.
with Mass DEP, that would be premature. I think to put on, to go down that route, we would have to then be saying this is what we might do, and then we would go around with trying to figure out, telling them that, but I'm not favoring that at this point. I mean, my sense would be to scrub the water out of the one well that you have and put it back in the other well you have.
And that's fine. It has been brought up in the past and discussed. So I want to, we to understand where the commission's feeling on this, and that's fine.
Does everybody follow what he's, saying? And the option would be still, just so that we're clear, instead of running all that pipe to bring it over to this system, if in fact, as a result of phase 4, we had to, do that, we would just, we still would have the option to just put those wells in another filtration system over in that area and just do a focused second filtration system.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I think that makes more sense, and then we'll let it, and we also would have the benefit of before then operating this other system and seeing, learning curve and how it works and identifying pitfalls there may be.
Yep.
I think it could be simple as also during the design of the system we're proposing to be put in is that we just have some T's and there were some valves, and if down the road we decided to run wells from that place over there because it made more sense than building a whole nother system, we could just tie it in and use it.
Well, I think the challenge there might not be as simple as a T and a valve because of the pump sizing,
But that's done in a well though.
But
You
it's
do that.
there is a head loss in pushing water 1,000 feet, right? So we would have to consider that. And then yes, there would be all that pipe and then cutting across your pavement.
I think the question is, should the new, all right, so let's take it to the point of designing a system to treat the water out of the current supply into the current discharge.
Yep.
Should there be an allowance in that design to tie into that system? Or is that unnecessarily complicated? In other words, is the benefit not there to provide that, because of other reasons? In other words,
I suppose you can always cut it over.
right, that would be my sense, that we might go, if we we might overly complicate something for something we don't know would happen. Versus, I see this as hopefully what I support is that we would move forward with the installation of a water scrubber, lack of a better word, filtration system that is in line for the existing geothermal. And there's our focus. That's what we're doing. Let DEP know. I do think we should get Weston and so you would need if that's what the commission wants, a new task order for that design. Would that be correct?
That's correct. And there are different kinds of treatment systems. I believe, Mr. Marks, you shared the system that the Wanacomet's using, which is not a GAC and it's not a resin, it's some other treatment system. So there are variable treatments, right? No?
It's resin.
It is resin. Okay. Yep.
That's a resin, because it pulls all the PFAS out, not just the AFFF. Right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's what's in that proposal, and it does have to have a boost pump on it.
Yeah. So there are
just the head loss for the filtering system.
Yeah. So there are a variety of treatment systems. Most of the treatment systems end up with a a waste product at the end, right? The resin gets contaminated, the granular activated carbon or the GAC system that you have at your fuel farm gets contaminated. So there will be a long time operating cost for the disposal of your filter media, no matter what system that you use.
So the question is amongst the commission, is there consensus to move forward with asking MJ for a task order, and this would be the project, would be this inline filtration system?
I'll make that motion.
I don't know, I think we don't, I think you have to vote, if everybody's in agreement, then what we would vote on is the task order. Once he, we just want to make sure that we've given him good direction. Mr. Viscarin, any thoughts?
I'm with you on that. I agree.
Okay, thanks, just wanted to check in. Perfect, Mr. Laston, do you need anything further from us?
No, we will develop a task order. Thank you.
Okay. And that'll bring us on to the capital project request.
Excuse
Yeah,
me
go
one
ahead.
second. We did talk about the need for this filter device to be enclosed in some kind of a weather-tight, climate-controlled housing. So we're, off the top of our head, I'm thinking, in the north ramp over by the electric vault. It's sort of close to where we'd need to be.
Makes sense. Hey, confirmed that, I was looking, as long as you got it.
Yeah,
I think that's the point. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Capital projects. Yeah.
So with that one, I think, Mr. Chair, you kind of had brought it up initially during the jet fuel discussion when it comes to the capital projects, and how to potentially proceed with that. So we do have scheduled October 9th to present our capital projects to the capital committee. So that gives us a month from today to determine whether we need to get a good dollar amount to add for that fuel farm onto the capital list.
Right, so to expand on that, the capital project requests in the packet are as of the same as last meeting.
Correct.
But we wanted to keep it on the agenda in case anything came up or anybody had any additional thoughts or ideas. And of course, this fuel farm has come up. The other question that had come up was the geothermal that we just talked about, and staff has determined that we're able to fund that through our existing appropriations related to PFAS remediation. So I don't think we have to put that in. And the question is, I think from the commission level, we won't have a meeting before that Capcom. There's also a presentation to the select board tomorrow night that has the capital items on there. And if we were gonna make a change tonight, we'd wanna probably mention that as, that this is coming. Or is it just not ready yet? Don't forget, this would be for fiscal year 27, right? So if we're gonna possibly have it, we might want to have a line item in there. And then the idea is having a line item, we're gonna have to rather quickly follow up with getting a number if we want to have it, per se, probably November. The October meeting would be an initial presentation. And then, if for Capcom's follow-up meetings, we're gonna have to provide information if we want a recommendation. Remember that the capital program committee it's not approving or denying, it's an advisory board to the finance committee. So, but it's very nice to it's very good spot to air out a lot of questions prior to town meeting. And their positive recommendation, their recommendation carries a very lot of weight with the finance committee, who's then recommending to town meeting for the airport stuff. So in terms of process, while it might not be approved, disapproved, it's very important and helpful to have their support. And I don't think there's a chance of, that we wouldn't have support without understanding the cost of the project. And it seems seems to me it's gonna be hard to do that on this time frame. And we don't want to talk about it and cause,
Yeah,
that's the way, but you know, how soon do we need this in terms of planning? Discussion thoughts? Put it on the list and try to crunch the work and see what Rich comes up with for a better number. Again, if we get it approved, we don't have to do it, but they're gonna want whatever number we put, having gone through Capcom, you know, and the housing is the other one. You know, we're gonna float out I think we're gonna be over based on everything I hear, $10 million, right? So let's just say that it's somewhere north of there, right, for a $10 million project. They're gonna want some homework behind that in order to get a positive recommendation, I think, you know, and is that realistic to have sort of on a pre-Thanksgiving type schedule? Yeah, so
I think to throw something into, Capcom and finance that is clearly half-baked, is going to, impact the credibility of the rest of the budget. And I think it would be much better not to include anything. And if possible, during the oral presentation, indicate that we're still researching what might be a significant addition for a fuel farm. But until it's ready, we're not there with it, and we may need to come back with a supplemental request. So at least you've given them a heads up, but you haven't just thrown out a number that's not defensible.
that's my concern. I agree with that.
Yeah.
So, and I appreciate, you know, Ms. Smith had some discussion today that I'm aware of with the finance director in case, I wanted to make sure that tonight everything was open for the commission to decide either way on that. And we could do it. It's not, the door isn't shut, but I agree that, I think, and perhaps that helps also from your end, Mr. Lazarus, we're also charged, you know, with both the geothermal and the terminal optimization. And then the focus perhaps, and I don't want to jump between agenda items, but putting it back to our jet fuel discussion, understanding staff limitations and timing, maybe we put a little more focus in the short term into trying to cram a fuel farm expansion design into getting some additional reservations and seeing what other options might be for least temporary storage that won't run us into any code compliance issues on the refuelers, and then know that this is a project we need to work on. That makes sense. Okay, so our capital project request stands as is. And but it's still up for discussion. And did anyone else have anything they wanted to? Yeah, right.
So, if we're gonna put the farm project kind of on hold, and do we up it to FY 28 on our big CIP list?
I think that probably makes sense.
Okay.
As a placeholder. I think from everything I've heard and watched this, I think we need more storage.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you know, but I think that has to be well developed before going prime time.
Yeah.
I don't know that we can do that on this kind of a schedule. Yeah, so love it.
Well, we have yet another number for the cost of fuel. I
Yeah.
see in the budget for 29, we have 2.5 million for 20,000 gallon tanks times 2. So there's 5 million there. So now we've heard 1 million, 2.5, 22 million.
Yeah, well, I think that's the point is I think the CIP for the out years. As a result of this discussion, we might need to. You know. Hone in on.
Yeah.
And I would think instead, we would do it all in 1 year. And we would combine them and then decide which year it's gonna be. And 28 would make more sense. And pull it from the other year. So whenever it is in our overall project that we adjust the CIP. And vote on that, we could have another, you know, look at that, pretty much the whole thing as well, which I think is timely coming out of the master plan process also.
That's good.
Well, doesn't this capital budget need to comport with the capital budget in the master plan? And I mean, I haven't gone line item by line item, but my sense in reading what's in the master plan and looking at this, there's some discrepancies.
Right, I don't think there's a perfect synergy there, and I guess that is the question out of the product out of the master plan, you know, which is not adopted yet. So as we fine tune this, we should
Yes,
get that to be in sync
yes.
prior to adoption. Those work on the CIP and then back it into the master plan. As opposed to running it the other way. But I don't think it's gonna work the other way.
Well, I guess I'm wondering which is the dog and which is the tail? Is the idea of the master plan to provide us with advice as to what we should do and then we budget for it? Or are we budgeting for things and then trying to get a master plan to tell us, okay, you've given us the number, now we're gonna write a recommendation for it?
Celeste, do you have any input on that?
So to Mr. Levitt's concern, those numbers are still being worked on. So clearly the fuel farm was a project that's been talked about for a while, and the number is clearly not complete yet. But the numbers should and will match when they're all done. But we are working on a series of numbers, and the challenge we've been having with Nantucket specifically is the prices over the years have been inflating very rapidly to the point where it's pretty hard to keep track of the numbers. But we are working on both of those documents as we speak.
So perhaps for our October meeting, we have an updated CIP to
We have
review.
Warren, did they get back to you on when our CIP meeting is with the FAA?
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up and I guess I can't. So the preliminary meeting is scheduled for October 2nd. There's some uncertainty due to the federal fiscal budget with having FAA come onto island. They have suggested going hybrid for that, which I think is a smart move. Mass DOT will be here on site with us, and then FAA will just remote in, but October 2nd is the day we would like to keep.
And so to be clear, at that meeting, Mr. Lasden, you and staff would have what you see as the final CIP for their review, but it's not actually, it's just a closer that then it's still back based on, it's a staff level meeting on that to revise it or get input, and then it comes to the commission after that. Is that the correct process?
This is the first review with the FAA and the state on the CIP. And it's, although they do obviously look at the prices, they're looking at the chessboard and deciding where the chessboard wants to settle out for the next couple years. But as you know, Mr. Chair, it's a very fluid document. It moves around. And even after the CIP meeting, there'll be comments from the state and the feds, and we'll move it around, and then they'll look at it and review it, and they'll move it around again. And in the FAA's mind, it probably won't be final until, December or January.
Okay, so perfect. So you'll have that meeting and draft, and we'll have it on our agenda for review at the October meeting.
Correct.
I'm good. Okay. Anything further on capital projects? Go ahead, love it.
If I look at the capital project list, I'm a little concerned about seeing the employee housing number in here. Is that something we
We
wanted
should
to
talk
talk
about that, yes.
When I looked at it, what jumped out at me was 6 million to build 6 bedrooms. And has that been benchmarked against anything else on the island? I know there's one well-known nonprofit near here that just did 6 bedrooms in a duplex townhouse for $1.5 million, which is 25% of that. And if those are all the bedrooms you need. You could go buy them on the open market and not bother building. So my first concern is that number seems way out of whack on the high side. But then my second concern is, how did we determine that all we need is 6 bedrooms? Do we need 10? Do we need 20? What are we going to need over the next few years? And given Richard's point at the way that prices are increasing on Nantucket, if we're going to need a lot of bedrooms over the next 3 to 4 years, it's certainly cheaper to build them now. And if we're not using them, perhaps rent out the excess capacity. But it seems to me to be more of an overall strategic plan rather than building them one at a time.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes, please.
So, all very good questions, Mr. Levitt. I guess I'll start out with the first one. Unfortunately, as a municipality, we can't do things at the cost of a nonprofit. We have to follow all public bidding rules and prevailing wages and construct things according to Chapter 149 in the state of Massachusetts. So the prices become significantly higher just because it's built as a municipality. So that's the first issue. The second issue was there is I'll call it a master plan for employee housing out there, and it's a drawing. And the first thing we built was what you see today. The next 2 that we were planning on building or I think you're referring to is 2 3-bedroom townhouses is the next thing that was on the list. Mr. Chairman, you have a look like that's incorrect now.
No, I guess the question was, are you saying that it would be 2 duplexes,
Correct.
or is it one duplex?
It's
right.
it's one duplex with 2 3-bedroom units in it. Correct.
Right. Okay.
So that was the next piece that was being looked at. And the third thing is regarding your sort of thought on renting it out. The airport actually has a letter from the FAA in Washington allowing the airport to build employee housing, but it can only be used for airport employees or public safety personnel such as police or fire. We could not use it for any other entity in the town or any other member of the public. It can only be used for airport employees.
Or individuals that, what I understand is listed under our emergency plan that supports.
Yeah, that's what I said, police and fire. Yes, your emergency response.
First responders that are related to airport operations.
But we can't use it for anybody else.
I recollect. I mean, it's a limited pool. So if we had extra bedrooms, which again, I don't know that that's really going to be our biggest problem. Who could get those? The bigger point in question, I think, and is sort of, how was this determined? Is this, do we really, I've always somewhat referred to this loosely as the airport's housing production plan, following kind of the towns. And there's 2 ways. You could do a study that says you need all of this stuff and, get after it. And we've had many years of discussion on this. And there's also what can you afford and what can you take on in terms of staff helping to manage these projects and all the way down to the finance. And so there was thinking on the commission, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but this is what I've taken from some years of this was a stepped approach. And that's what Mr. Laz did. So we were going to do the dorm to get seasonals out of the Thompson house and then look at a townhouse, probably another townhouse, and then perhaps the replacement of the Thompson house for a manager house. That comes 2025. We needed a manager, a curveball a little bit, and that we actually purchased the house. So where does that leave us and what should we do becomes part of the question, I think. And that's open for discussion for sure. The bigger I share a concern, having gone through at least a half dozen, meetings last fall where it just did not go well for the airport with the same exact request. And I don't think anything has materially changed in terms of information that the airport has prepared for the housing, right? They're very wide estimates, and that did not sit well with the other reviewing and recommending agencies. And I think we're in for the same thing again if we continue down this same path. I think that might be what you're getting at. And what should we do?
So,
Yeah, I mean, Rich, to go back on what you said.
Yeah.
My concern is, I look at this.
Yeah.
Very simplistically, 6 million for 6 bedrooms is $1 million a bedroom. There are other entities on island that are doing it for $500,000 a bedroom, including the hospital and including the town. And if you look at the agenda for the select board tomorrow night, the housing folks are presenting, and I believe they have a number per bedroom that starts with a 5. And that is a municipal entity with all of the municipal overhead building. So to walk in there and tell them that it's going to cost 2x, I think you would be laughed out of there and be embarrassed to do that. The second point is that rather than focusing on perhaps building on this piece of land adjacent to where we just built the dorm and we paid to put in infrastructure, if we could build that somewhere else for less money and have the flexibility of renting out the rooms if it wasn't sitting on airport land, that may be a better option. Or again, going into the open market and purchasing. The hospital just bought a bunch of houses at Richmond Development and paid around $500,000 a bedroom, where you can go in and move in tomorrow. So maybe the focus has just been too much on, we have this piece of land, we put in the infrastructure, and therefore we're going to build on it. One would think we could do it for less there than somewhere else, since we're not having to pay for the dirt. But these numbers make it sound like we'd be paying a premium to do that, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah, my sense is that we don't really have a good estimate on what it, and I don't understand why a duplex is gonna cost $6 million when the road has been put in. And I get the points of the discussion of that. If I was on the other side of this too, I just don't see that as a realistic number. And we had, working with Noah, I think that you guys kind of got it down to about 4.5. Now I feel like the 6 again was just got carried over. And we never really did too much more work. Yeah,
I think it was 4.5 million with $1.5 million on top of that for the OPM costs is what that was, if I'm correct.
so can I just share?
Yeah, no.
That's what the estimate was that I provided.
Can I just share my screen real quick, Mr. Chair?
And I have one other thought I'd like to float once we get through this.
Can I share my screen? I'm sorry.
Yeah, oh, yes, please. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm sorry. So Mr. Levitt, when you see the CIP, there is an Excel spreadsheet, and behind the Excel spreadsheet, and you don't have the final version yet, there is a whole series of tabs on how we develop the prices. And yes, they are very high level, but they sort of help us get to where we're getting to. And so this is the one that we have used for the housing. And again, this is all of the tabs. You can see them all here, right? Every one of them has a tab. And so this is what it was, 3,600 square feet at $1,000 a square foot. And then some site clearing, some excavation, some paving, et cetera, a cost some engineering cope, some architectural fees, some contingencies. That's sort of the high level discussion on how we came up with our price. And you know, traditionally over the years, we've done this on every one of our CIPs. The front piece that you see, you know, the front piece that you see is this document. And then, like I said, there was a piece behind every one of them on how we can. So when we have these conversations with you, there is a number there.
Very quickly, is this construction cost based upon modular or stick built?
$1,000 a square foot on Nantucket would be modular.
All right. I just don't think this is gonna fly.
And that's
I'm
fine,
not gonna
Mr. Chair.
do
Yeah.
Another round of last year of trying to defend a $6 million duplex.
No way. No way.
Not when we can go out and before it was, then they said you should go buy something. We were told we couldn't, this, that, and we go, that we actually can. Half duplex on the market right now, 1.5 million. So that's 500,000 a bedroom. That's Mr. Levin's point, right? We can't go in sort of this. Another idea. Perhaps a pivot for the, you know, we want to continue on our production of some housing, right? What about revising this request to finish the basement for this year while we work on, you know, I can't remember off the top of my head whether we thought we were gonna get 2 apartments down there or if it was 1 and then some storage. You know, ideally, that is not in the dorm style. That becomes a standalone unit. So, you know, perhaps it could, you know, it's a little different. What about thinking about, and I don't know what that number would be, but I could see it being more well received. I think that we could, you know, during the process, before they start even getting all worked out, that's not going to work. You're right. And so come up with another number and say, we're going to continue to look at in this next year, whether we're going to buy something, what our other options of development at a lower cost are, but not to completely lose a fiscal year of not developing any housing for the airport. And what if we were to try to develop a number for what it would be to finish the basement and get another unit? That's a thought I had.
Is there a strategic plan that has a forecast of how much housing will be needed over the next 5 years?
I think we need to work on it. I think we need we have a new manager. I think you know, that the term I was using loose. This has been a kind of do what you can, and that might not be the best long-term planning approach. And maybe this is a hybrid year to, I think, you know, I wanted to see personally the basement done as part of the other project. We ran into the same things, but you know, if we could pick up a unit and then commit as a commission to looking at a housing study. Part of what makes that difficult too is that town is doing so much other housing, which of course the airport employees are eligible for, but you know, we wouldn't control that the way that we could. We don't know what that will be. We're at the mercy sort of someone else deciding whether our employees are gonna get that or not. So, and we're not gonna come up with, I don't think, sort of full study understanding of what we need and how we would get into that capital planning here in the next 2 months. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think my sense is it would be a bigger effort than that, but maybe it's not that hard. I don't know.
Let me try this another way. Everybody agrees that housing is going to be needed.
Sure.
Nobody knows what the number is.
I think that's where we're at.
Why don't we come up with a number and say that we want 6 million in the budget, and that's going to be used to either build or acquire 10 bedrooms at 600,000 each. And we're working on the plan of exactly whether we're gonna build or buy. And we'll come back to you once we have our plan together.
I mean, I don't know that that's gonna, how, two things on the mechanism. I like the idea of keeping it in there, knowing that we're trying to dedicate that money. One, how does a reviewing agency authority have, what's the catch on that 600, right? Like, how do we know that we can do it at that number? And you're saying if you can't, you don't, right? Is what I'm hearing. And what happens if it's 620 kind of a thing? Like, where, you know what I mean? How do we do that?
Well, one, don't we have other things that go over budget? Isn't there the ability to go back to them? We're talking about doing this in the 2028 budget. So before that money's going to be spent, we're going to be back there at least once more.
Isn't this 27? It's 28.
It's 28.
Not this year.
I'm looking at
It's
not 27.
28.
What's that?
I don't think.
No, it wasn't
There's
on the
no
27.
capital
No, it's
project
for
in
28.
27 for housing.
It's in 28.
Thanks for setting that. So, okay, yeah, then I wouldn't want to lose. And would we have any money for 27 to potentially do the basement? Did we have? Is there a way to maybe do that? I guess that's maybe not gonna be answered tonight, but maybe I'd like us to think about. Now, if we get a CO, we get out of that building, then we pick up another unit, what's that gonna take? And, we don't have to go down that road, see what everybody thinks, and maybe it's premature to the other part, maybe you want to factor it into that. But I'm okay with an approach if you thought we could get through there that just says we're not saying we're gonna build one duplex. We're coming in with a number that says we're looking to acquire, there's a different strategy. 10 bedrooms. I don't know if it'll fly. It's not, what I think is hard there is it's not a specific capital project. Right? Because it doesn't have, you're not saying I'm gonna build a 10-bedroom house for $6 million.
No, but I think before this money is finally approved, it's going to be back to them in a more detailed form in a current year. And I would think over the next year, we ought to be able to put together a strategic housing plan and know what and how fast we're going to build over the next 3 to 5 years.
I certainly like that approach better than trying to go in and explain that we want to build a $6 million duplex.
Yeah, so.
I don't know that we're gonna be able to build 600, that's back to, just the last, like, it's trenching along there, but we'll have to work on it. How do we get, and I get the other option would be then we wouldn't run into the same, let's say we were gonna purchase something, his question back through finance would be, would that capital approval be eligible to be used for an acquisition?
Well, but if the line item is put in that we are either going to build or acquire, details to follow.
Yeah, that'd be a question, I think, for probably Mr. Turbot to
Right.
see. I think I like the strategy. But I think we want to make sure that because what happens to that money when we, how do we revise that when the commitment was made that that's what the bedroom cost is going to be? But I'm supportive of that approach much more than and I like it better than just pulling it. It's already been floated out there. And the problem that I think everyone sort of has is that cost per bedroom. That's what we're really faced. And that this addresses that. And it's a good idea.
Well, along those same lines, since we know we're probably going to need more than 10 bedrooms over the next 5 years, the following year, put in $6.5 million and say the bedrooms are going to cost $650 each. The following year, and and show that we're already starting to think about a multi-year plan.
Does anybody, I guess, have ideas besides, in terms of determining that need? And developing that strategic plan, is that something that we need some outside help with, or, how do we project that, I guess is the question. Is it something that we might want to engage somebody for, or how does that get done?
I do it every day. It's not easy. It's like people have places to live and then the next day they don't,
Right.
Right.
literally.
I mean, you can take the chart and say everybody in 5 years, but where do we, from a
But
planning?
they all don't need
perspective?
3 bedrooms,
Yeah,
right? Some of them need 1.
And how do you balance seasonality to year round?
and I think that's the diversity we had been trying to look at, with the dorm versus, and that's why I like that apartment, like that could be like a couple, and then a 3-bedroom, a family to some extent, right? That you're trying to have a diversity of housing options.
I think a good start is to just like, literally, Warren puts together a list of no names of everybody that works at the airport. And what would, if you had to house every single person that worked for us today, right? What is that? And then,
Island's going.
right, and what is that? Like, it's like, it's 6 married couples, they have 2 kids, 1 kid, and I think that's a good way to start. right?
Yeah.
And then just look at.
Yeah, know what you
already
have.
Actually have.
Yeah,
Mhm.
And if you had to provide them all with housing. I'll be honest with you, that's what I'm doing right now, like, I'm working at that right now, that's what.
yeah,
We're working on the side, right, it's like. I have all these people and I'm trying to build the bedrooms to fit the people that are working there and. Try to make it work, so. I think that's
that's
just
something you think that makes sense to,
Yeah, it makes sense. I think Commissioner Levitt had kind of sent me a kind of preliminary idea as well. For sure, yeah. I think some-
and then if everybody is sort of, on board with this bit of a change from the townhouse proposal before we go into Capcom, we might want to vote on a revised capital project request list where we hold the number but change the phrasing. They were expecting something possibly revised from us anyway. Just a thought, right? So that, and we also could then verbally, at the select board as part of it, be like, we know, when that comes up, they like, we get it. So we realize that we need to be closer to this number, and we're really, our goal with the $6 million is to achieve 10 bedrooms. And we need some, and we know that's what we're gonna work on, that's what we're committed to working on, but we need to know that we have some money to work with to achieve our housing production goal of some sort. Any thoughts? Mr. Muscarin?
Yeah, I think we need to think about this fuel farm discussion disturbed me quite a lot. We've
Which
got
one?
the fuel farm
Yeah,
expense that disturbs me a lot. More than employees, we need fuel. If we've got 4 years left in the fuel farm, I'm much more concerned about that than housing some people here. Really. I mean, we've got only so much money. Retained earnings are down to 0. Okay, we have to kind of think about where we're going to find this money.
we're gonna pump fuel.
Looking down the road, if we need to replace the fuel farm in 4 years,
Permission.
is that a real number? I mean, is that true?
It's not the whole field farm.
No, that was the avgas tank.
The underground.
Yeah, that's just the avgas tanks.
Fine.
And it's only a warranty, so we're not at an end of service life, but it's good, it was very good to be aware of the age of those tanks if we were gonna consider a conversion. Right.
Yeah, I'm choking on the $8 million we already spent. Are those bedrooms full now?
They could be, but they're not. If we can, I don't need to speak for this Smith, but that's a whole nother piece of things is that if we fill them this time of year, what are we gonna do with our seasonals? So that's, I think Mr. Smith's got some you know, figuring out how we're gonna utilize that. And I don't know that, I think we're starting to get a little late here tonight on that, to decide, whether that becomes some other utilized differently on a housing basis, and you continue to see how much longer you get out of the seasonal operation that you had. But I don't know that tonight's I think that you would factor that into the list that you're working on and your available units. That we don't give up the Thompson House as quickly as we had thought. Or
Keep
hope.
recycling that thing. Yeah.
Or house.
That'll have to be a discussion before, I think. So, but I guess the question is to advance this, given that certainly I want to go into the Capcom, with representing the position of the commission. And Aldeal is really going to be Smith, and that line item as suggested by Mr. Levitt, from a townhouse to acquiring 10 bedrooms, to creating or acquiring. I like that language. I think it's a different suggestion. That was it.
I support that. That's good.
All right.
Mhm.
So I think that what we are in the consensus would be to revise that one description. But in this way, you're going back to them. We're not changing any numbers. We're not asking for any more. We've heard the concerns. And then that's the starting point of the discussion when we go into that meeting, as opposed to a starting point of here you are again. Same thing. I think this has been well beat. Anything else on capital projects?
I do have just a real
Yeah.
quick curiosity question. This one's more for you, Rich.
Yeah.
Not to beat a dead horse, just a yes, no, or maybe due to time, but when that letter with the FAA, it was just
Yep.
before my tenure here, when
Yep.
it says airport operations, is that specifically town of Nantucket airport operations, or does that include airline support operations, ground crew?
It's municipal employees. It's not airline. Municipal
Right.
employees.
Safety
And they
related.
made an exemption
Gotcha.
to say, first responders that assist you at the
Sure.
airport can be
Sure.
put in there.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was defined and that we're
Yep.
not saying, well, you should let the airlines move in if
No.
they have that opportunity.
Oh, no.
Okay, sure, that's just want to make sure. Okay, well,
I assume only first responders include everybody at the hospital.
I
I don't.
don't believe so. I think it's just police and fire.
But is the hospital part of our emergency plan?
That's a Preston question.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I mean, in the big picture, yes, are they listed in the emergency plan under certain specific individual plans? Yes, I'm sure they are, yeah.
So if that's the case, why wouldn't a nurse be considered a first responder?
I think,
If God forbid there's an incident out there, aren't some of those nurses gonna be there and be participating?
that might be a question.
Well, I don't know
for
if a
legal
nurse would be
counsel.
out, there'd be more of a paramedic, that'd be on the airfield.
If I
EMT.
may, I think that
Sorry.
at this point, we're barely gonna be able to provide enough for the employees that we have.
True.
And secondly, I would not want to be on the fringe of having to check with the FAA sort of thing on.
No, you don't do
We
that.
don't want to be in a gray area there.
Correct.
It was about safety related positions.
Yeah.
It wasn't everybody.
It was a hard one.
Yeah,
Approval, and we would want to be very cautious that something didn't happen, that we went too far afield, I think. So fair question, but I think that I would be very cautious that we didn't get an interpretation that we, went too far with that. Cause I don't think it is clear cut. If we're left to interpret it ourselves.
it was
They-
definitely safety related.
Right.
Had to be so that anticipated police or fire. Cause we were thinking doing a big one when we started.
And, and are we permitted to put anybody in an empty bedroom if they have to be out on 30 days notice?
I
For
don't think so.
instance? I mean, the FAA would rather us keep a bedroom empty rather than earning some revenue by renting it out.
I think so.
Yeah, we would, yeah, that would be a foul of.
I think so. Yeah. I,
Yeah,
from what we went through and being told, no, you can't do this at all.
there are certain things,
There's only,
ways you could
yeah,
finance
only
it, certain things you can.
what I've been told, there's only 2 airports and we're one of them that are able to have housing on airport land. So, you know, how far do we want to go with? And I'm not sure, I mean, how would you even create more units than the demand that you have that really even becomes that you'd be looking for tenants on Nantucket?
Well, but if we get a CO tomorrow, some of those bedrooms gonna be empty until the seasonals come next spring?
That is the plan unless
The discussion
something's
that we're
gonna
have.
change, you know? I mean, that's part of the, you know, the hard part is you put somebody in there and you have to get them out and the ability to get them out in order to put your seasonals in, right? So, but yeah, right, as of right now, it will be empty. And you're looking at, I think, from a purely revenue perspective, and I think we have to be very careful about compliance, which is we're lucky to have the housing more than that delta, I think, of the revenue. I appreciate that. That's just my sense of things. I think the bigger question is if you have this would be a rabbit hole, but you have airport employees that are currently in need. If you have an open space and you put them in, but then you need it for your seasonals, right? That's the conflict that I see more than anything. I think I don't know that we're gonna settle that tonight, and I'm not sure where, but, and I also, and part of that comes down to, it's really, I think, a manager's decision, so whatever input commission might want to provide as to how that's done, and whether Mr. Smith, you would want that as a agenda item for any direction or discussion or thoughts for a future meeting. I think it's a really hard one too.
I think they also designated it as aeronautical use. The land as aeronautical use. And that was a big win. But that's gonna mean,
I don't remember that.
no,
It could, I'm not saying it, but
yeah,
I
'cause,
didn't
yeah,
know
Mary
that.
McCarthy signed off on it and signed it as aeronautical use.
Sorry, that we, for right now, for tonight, on the housing and the money and the cap requests, and I think it's gonna have to stay, honestly, we're gonna have to figure out what we're gonna do here. All right, that leads us on to, where were you, Smith?
Finance section D, the preliminary FY 27 budget review.
Do we have anything further changes on that?
No, there's no changes. We're still in development. October 27th is when the budget meeting's been scheduled. So we're not planning on increasing year over year from last year to this year. Again, as we get more of a refined number, I'll share that with the commission board for at least you guys have an idea and you can see that.
Did anybody have any input or questions? Do you want to talk about the budget at all at this point? We still have it, or do you want to continue to try to meet with staff?
Yeah.
And we would have ability to review this at the October meeting. But if there's anything you want to bring up, it's on the agenda.
So we're talking about the operating budget.
Correct.
Or
Yes,
the
operating.
capital budget.
No, it was the operating.
Is there a current one that's been shared?
No, but I can get that for you. I can get you this year's. You bet.
Yeah, you can send that to everybody.
Yeah,
please.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so will that be on the October?
Definitely.
Yes,
Absolutely,
yeah,
without a
yeah,
doubt.
yeah.
And any input in advance that you want.
Yep.
That might help refine that, certainly. Okay, and then manager's report.
Yeah, manager, or real quick, the AIP items, we have the master plan. Final public open house is scheduled for this Thursday, September 11th in the airport main terminal area. I do believe around the gate 1 area where the Cape Air gate is. So yeah, please come, one and all, to discuss the future projects and just meet face to face with the general public.
And what time?
Thank you. 5:30 to 7:30. Yeah. Thank you.
I think it's 5:27.
This one is 5:30 to 7:30.
I think it's 5:11. Hopefully
Let me check on that. It could be 5 to 7.
Yeah, I thought it was 5 to 7.
Okay, let's say 5 to 7.
Okay.
Thanks. All right. Just continuing environmental monitoring, we are scheduling a TAC advisory or technical advisory meeting, looking late October, early November. We're just finalizing people's schedules to make that happen for that meeting. We did have an initial discussion with McFarland Johnson in regard to the concrete hard stands. Gate 1 does not have concrete down on it. Gate 2 Alpha is sort of half and half has concrete because Gate 2 has the main concrete. As aircraft are upgauging, as we have A220s, as Preston had mentioned, potentially American Airlines looking to upgauge to an A319. Of course, we want to make sure that those gates are structurally sound. And so we are having the initial discussion on how we're going to pave those gates for the main wheel gear for those aircraft. Same with the ground support equipment building. We held an initial scoping meeting with McFarland Johnson as well. The intent is to put the ground support building behind the ARF station, and construction hopefully is been thrown around the idea of potentially FY 28, August of 28, due to Mass DOT telling us that there could be some budgetary issues for them this year. So they had requested it to have construction be August of next year. So more to come there.
On that one point though, is that going to be in addition? Do we still need that if we're going to end up with the other half of the current SRE?
So the SRE is for snow removal equipment. This is for the ground support equipment for the
But we're not going to store any of that. Okay, so this we
No.
need this.
Yeah, we do need this. Yeah. So that's all I have for AIP. Only one item for non-AIP is the sand barrier noise wall, which I've already provided an update for. RFPs right now, as we had briefly mentioned, that we were proceeding with Clean Harbors to do the ARF transition. We've had actually some lack of communication success with them, trying to get them to talk to us. So we are working that out right now. Hopefully they'll start talking to us, unfortunately. And then aircraft boarding ramp, the scope of work has been written with the intent to submit the IFB in the upcoming weeks. Operations update, as I'd mentioned before, American Airlines is in high-level discussions with their networking team with the potential of upgrading one of their aircraft to an Airbus 319. They're also looking at potential RON or rest overnight aircraft, as well as dual operations. So we are working with our consultants to work out the logistics, size of aircraft, how we can make it work with our 6 gates that we have, functionality, feasibility, spacing. That's all being worked out right now. So more to come with that. Again, it's very high level right now, but they're definitely letting us know that they're talking about it. The next item is the bag belt system. We've not had any bag belt issues this past month, knock on wood, since the last issues that we've had. So it's been working properly. No updates to training. IT, the FBO, the SRE, finance, and the admin and computers have all been upgraded to the Windows 11 software. The janitor's office is the last one to get updated. All the security servers, which is our directory server for doors, gates, and workstations and cameras, have been updated to Windows Server 2019. And the mobility server has been updated to Windows Pro 11, which should be good for another 10 years of service. The town of Nantucket Public Works has started their Surfside Enhancement Project, which is Lovers Lane, is that Monahans Airport. They've started to do some preliminary work there on Airport Road. I do believe from my cabinet meeting, I overheard Mr. Patnote say that the tree clearing is to begin imminently for this project. To what extent that is on Airport Road, I don't know, so I'll reach out to him on that. So yeah, you're going to start seeing a lot of movement in that area around the airport. We've also verified to make sure that we keep our gate open for our fuel trucks in the morning, because that comes first and foremost for us. The camera systems, we finally got the new switches for the camera systems. They have been replaced. It has fixed the issue. The cameras are now functioning properly, running as they should. Same with the doors. It seemed to some way with the switches, it was a network issue that was perpetually causing the cameras to basically restart every 10 to 15 seconds. It was a headache and a nightmare. That has been updated. we're running as we should. So I'm very pleased to see. I don't have an answer as it pertains to the IT cloud base for the cameras. We have been hounding our camera pavilions who we use if that is an option, if they do allow it. Once I get better information from that, I'll share that with you guys. But there still is that opportunity to have that server on a cloud-based system. Also, the TSA regulations, if there's any that are specific to that, we're still waiting to hear back from that. Fuel sales continue to see records. The airport did implement a one-day fuel uplift on Saturday, August 30th. However, as the day went on, there was decreased demand and we were able to uplift that early, which was great. NBC Peacock is going to be on site at the terminal tomorrow to begin the filming of a short scene in the new Ellen Hildebrand series entitled 5-Star Weekend. The filming will be at the Gate 1 area. Departures for Cape Air are going to actually move to the arrival area, which actually already has seating currently available for those passengers. We confirmed with Cape Air if they would allow us to do that, they're totally fine with that. We're in agreement that that was okay for us to move them for that day. It's really for just a couple of hours that they're going to be filming. The film crew has paid their special permit fees for this project, and everything's good to go. Same with on the town side. The town has collected the fees and the permits for that. TSA is going to have a moment of silence on September 11th at 8:45 and 1 p.m. It is their annual tradition in honor of the September 11th attacks. The TSA operations will cease for roughly 4 minutes out of respect to those who lost their lives 24 years ago. Hard to believe it's been 24 years. They will wear long sleeves and ties with their uniforms as a mark of respect, as they typically do. It should not disrupt operations. Of course, 4 minutes is not a long time, but it definitely is out of respect to those who lost their lives. A pre-written airport announcement explaining the pause is going to be broadcast at the request of TSA through the announcing system, which I've sent off to Rob Holtgate, our airport security coordinator, to handle that. One final thing. Coming up in October is the Massachusetts Airport Management Association's annual meeting and workshop, and they have invited the commissioners from all of our airports to attend a half-day commissioner workshop. It is on Sunday, October 19th from 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. This year's annual meeting is at the Margaritaville in Hyannis. So once I get back to my desk tomorrow morning, I will send you all. Maybe I already sent it to you.
Yes.
Or I did send it to you. That's right. Yeah, okay. A lot on the plate today. I sent it to you, so feel free to attend as you would like. I'm not going to be able to make it on Sunday. However, I'll be at the meeting on the conference on Monday and Tuesday. But please feel free to attend if you choose to do so. And then Massachusetts Department of Transportation did provide us a return of $800,000 toward the dorm housing, which is a big win for the airport. We were not expecting that, but they were able to secure some additional monies for us. They like what we're doing with housing and gave us a sum of roughly $800,000. So really pleased to see that. Thank you. Yeah.
So did you say 800 or 800?
800,000.
800?
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah. Very big
that's
one.
good.
Any questions
Yeah.
on the manager's report?
Do you want me to run through the statistics? Lack of time? Okay.
If everybody else does, we can all read them.
Come on.
I would just mention, the one thing that you mentioned, I have some pause or concern over, the commercial operators that will remain overnight as a pretty significant change of, use and the way that the airport has previously handled what happens with our limited gates. I'm not asking us to go down a big, but that's unusual. What does that mean? We have morning fog. They can't get off the gate. I mean, obviously, if you have morning fog, maybe someone's also not getting in, but I could just see that logistically, do you?
Except
gets
it
back-
might be opposite what the schedule is, like they're all coming in mid-morning or.
I don't know, but I think that it's a pretty big change from the way it's always been done. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done because of that, But I just think that back to your point on that earlier comment about gate management software and considering that. So just want to make sure there's no unintended consequences as we continue to try to cram more and more into that same bit of space every year. The demand on the airport resources continues to get greater. Now that's great service to the public and use of the airport. But we've got to balance it with, you know, the ability for the resources that you have. So thoughts, yeah.
Well, it might actually be better in that it now spreads peak load out to earlier in the day when it isn't being used. And in terms of providing service to residents of the island, people that want to get off early and go do a day trip to New York for business or personal reasons. It means that they now have the opportunity to get out of here early and aren't necessarily having to leave the night before.
Yeah.
I mean, fog's always going to be a problem.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's just different. So that's why I wanted to flag it, you know, so that everybody, you know, in case it just was
Theoretically get back later too.
buried
Yeah.
in that you know, for you know, the commercial and then whatever is gonna go along with that. So I just think it's something that the commission should, I just wanted to flag it because it is a pretty big change. That's all.
Just last thing, personnel report, we are interviewing for an airport operations specialist in the ARC and with ARC, and then the FBO customer service representative as well. That's all I got. Thank you.
Commissioners' comments? Public comment?
No one from the public.
Motion to adjourn. So move. There's a second. Mr. Viscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Blazer,
Aye.
Levitt,
Hi.
Mark. Sure, aye. Thank you all.
And thank you. And your fearless leader.
Yeah.